See, a lot of people want to get rich. That was my poor dad. He says, I'll make a lot more money. So he got a high-paying job, and he kept going back to school. And my rich dad says, no, wealth is measured in time. So if you quit your job, how long can you survive? I was born in Honolulu. When I was younger, my poor dad moved to the Big Island. So we went from the big city to a small sugar plantation town called Hilo, Hawaii. My dad never graduated from college. What happened was he was so smart that he got his bachelor's in 2 years. He became a professor at University of Hawaii. He had me as a son, and I was flunking out of school. Even though I had F's, I got congressional nominations to Naval Academy. I had bad grades, but high SATs. And I always wanted to go to Merchant Marine Academy to sail the seas. Kings Point had the distinction back in '65 of being the highest paid graduates in the world. So when I graduated in '69 with a Bachelor of Science degree, starting pay for us was about $120,000 a year. So '69, that was a lot of money. But I had to sail into Vietnam. So if I sailed into Vietnam, I got $120K a year. And also, I had to be a member of the union, the labor union. I don't want to join the union because as Marx says, workers of the world unite. And poor dad was head of the teachers union. And I didn't want to join the union. So that's why I took a lower paying job at $48,000 a year. And '69 was still pretty good. Economics teacher was a great guy. So when I got back, I went back to visit my school, the academy. I sat down and talked to him. I said, what's it like to fly a B-17? What's it like to get shot down? What's it like to be a prisoner of war? And the more he told me how horrible it was, I said, I want to do that. And so in 1969, I quit a relatively high-paying job of $48K a year. So I joined the U.S. Marine Corps, proving I'm not the brightest guy in the box. I went from making $48,000 a year to $200 a month. And it was a shock. And so what's the fastest way to Vietnam? And this is in 1969. He goes, gunships. I said, the helicopter gunship. I said, why gunships? And he said, because they're getting shot down, you idiot. Your life expectancy once you got to Vietnam was 30 days. It turned off most people, but being a Marine and proving I'm not the brightest guy in the world, I said, I want to try that. So by 1972, I'm flying in Vietnam off a carrier helicopter gunship, and I went down 3 times. And it was the best experience of my life. And the reason it was good, Vlad, is because in Vietnam, I saw communism. You know, I saw it in real life. Exactly what Marx was saying was happening in real life. And the sad thing is that it's now here in America. The Marine Corps taught me a lot about life. You know, that today in our, what do you call it, those woke schools and those snowflake schools, you can't hurt somebody's feelings and all this. Well, God almighty, what are we raising? You know, in the Marine Corps, they're called pussies. What do I have to do to be an entrepreneur? Because my poor dad wanted me to be a pilot, fly for the airlines, and be an employee. And I didn't want to do that. So I asked my rich dad, what should I do? And he was my best friend's father. I want to be an entrepreneur like him and an investor. He says, you have to learn how to sell. I argued and bitched and moaned with my rich dad. And I said, I don't want to learn how to sell. I don't want to sell. You know, tell me something. Tell me what I can do. I'll go back to school. And finally, rich dad said to me, Robert, how's your sex life? I looked at my rich dad and I said, I don't have a sex life. Because you can't sell, you idiot. So with that, I went against, again, my poor dad's wishes. I got hired by Xerox to learn how to sell. When I was at the academy in New York, we were #1 sailing school in America. So we used to take sails and we'd make wallets out of them. Because when we're on the ocean with leather wallets, they would get wet and rot. So in 1977, when I'm now out of the academy, out of the military, and thinking my first venture, I'm still at Xerox. And I figured, what's my first product? And my friends and I said, well, that wallet you carry is kind of interesting. So we took that wallet to Korea. We had them make them, and we imported them back to the States. We made Runner's World magazine. We were very, very successful. So the wallets were taking off all over the world, and I was out of money. We couldn't supply the demand. It takes a lot of money to buy inventory. My CFO at the time, he said, raise some money. So I raised another $100,000 from my poor dad. My poor dad second mortgaged his house. He's a good guy, my dad was. He says, if this is what you want to do, be an entrepreneur, I'll support you. Rich Dad turned me down. He says, why should I give you money? Because you're an idiot. He says, you have a bunch of crooks as partners, which was true. So I gave the check to my CFO, Stanley. And I said, Stanley, will this solve the problem? And he smiled, yes, it will. And it did solve the problem, his problem. He took that check, cashed it, and paid off his investors. So I was out of money. I saw all my investors, including my poor dad, and the whole business went down because Stanley ran off with the money. And so that was one of the first lessons I learned about real life is you got to be careful who you do business with. And just because the guy's a CPA and another guy's got his MBA doesn't mean they're honest people. From there, I just kept stumbling along. Went back to real estate, started making my money back there. I paid off my father. I had met a guy named R. Buckminster Fuller, a guy that invented the geodesic dome and all that. And so all through my life, I studied Bucky Fuller, and he got to me. He asked the question, he says, what does God want you to do? What do you know? What do you know that maybe schools don't recognize? What would you do for free forever? All of us are born with a purpose in life. He says, what does God want you to do? And I said, well, we don't teach money at school, and I think I do understand about money now. And with that point, I started to teach entrepreneurship for free in Hawaii. And the more I did that, the more I found magic happened. Because I wasn't doing it for me this time. I was doing it for what Fuller called the universe, to give back your gift. That teaching in Hawaii wound up to be Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You see, the hardest thing in life is rejection. How do you handle when somebody rejects you? So when I published Rich Dad, Poor Dad, nobody would buy the damn book. And so I put it in my friend's car wash in Austin, Texas. And guess who bought the first book? An Amway distributor. and he was an orthopedic surgeon, and he's still a good friend of mine. And he bought the book, and he says, oh my God, he read the book, and he sent it up to his upline in Dallas. He bought it in Austin, he sent it to Dallas, and the diamond in Dallas called me up, and he says, pretty good book you got there. And he says, would you mind speaking to my group? And so I started teaching at Amway conventions. And guess what? The book went to bestseller list. And then Oprah found it, then Trump found it. And it was because I was just supporting people in the same kind of mindset, should I say. When I was 10 years old, my rich dad played Monopoly with me. And we all know the formula, 4 greenhouses, 1031 tax deferred exchange. So today I own about 12,000 rental units, but it's not the story. The real story is, how did I acquire those property? I used debt. And that's what they don't teach you in school. You see, the more debt I use, the more property I own, the less tax I pay. The facts are, America was founded as a tax-free nation. It was called the Boston Tea Party. I think it was 1773. And we were tax-free for all of these years until 1913, when the Fed was created. In 1913, the Fed was created. The same year, guess what else was created? The IRS, Amendment 16. And ever since then, we're paying taxes. So guys like me pay no taxes legally. But the more harder you work, the more money you make, the higher taxes you pay. If that's not communism, what is? You got to choose your teacher.
Sure.
That's all I'm saying. Like when I was in Sunday school, I was like 8 or 9 years old, and the Sunday school was a young teacher. This is in Hawaii. And she said, why were the 3 wise men wise? I said, because they're rich. And she goes, why? So they had gold, frankincense, and myrrh. You got to be rich to have that stuff. And she shakes her head because this violates every one of her Christian values about the love of money is the root of all evil, right? She says, that's why they weren't wise. I said, so tell me why. So one of the most valuable lessons my little Sunday school teacher taught me. She says, because they always sought the best teacher. And for them, it was Christ. In real life, seek your teachers. If you listen to a school teacher about money, I'll pray for you tonight. Your biggest asset is between this year and this year. It's called your brain, but it's also your biggest liability if you don't feed it well.